Just as ordinary people had refused the tyrannies of the king, it is ordinary people, farmers and laborers, who will fight and die for liberty. At Boston's Bunker Hill, 1,000 British soldiers die, while the colonials lose less than 500. Here is proof that the untrained ragtag patriots can stand up to the best of England. But the war is just beginning, and the American militia is soon driven from Boston. It will take more than bullets to defeat the British and create a new America. The powerful words of one man, Thomas Paine, will help transform a war into a revolution.
Tom Paine was one of the more unusual men who made the American Revolution. He came from the lower classes of England, unlike most of the leaders of the Revolution who were fairly prominent merchants or planters or lawyers in the American colonies. He only arrived in America in 1774, just really on the eve of independence. He came with sentiments about the poor in England and how they were mistreated, dislike of hereditary rule and monarchy. Early in 1776, he wrote the famous pamphlet Common Sense, which was the first public call for American independence.
120,000 copies sell in just 3 months to farmers, tradesmen, seamen, and laborers.
O ye that love mankind, ye that dare oppose not only the tyranny, but the tyrant, stand forth. Every spot of the old world is overrun with oppression. Freedom has been hunted around the globe.
He called for a new democratic kind of government in what would become the United States, and the mission of the American Revolution was to create what he said an asylum for liberty. In other words, this was not just the movement of a couple of million people on one side of the Atlantic battling the mother country. Why should someone in France or Germany or some other country care about that? But the reason was this was part of the worldwide expansion of freedom, and America would be this asylum of liberty.
The idea of liberty for all is not lost on colonial women, especially Abigail Adams. She makes a pointed suggestion to her husband John, a delegate to the Continental Congress, concerning the rights of women.
Remember the ladies. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. If particular care and attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation.
Women are not about to stand by and let men fight the revolution without them. Many, like Sarah Osborne, follow her blacksmith husband to war.
Washing, mending, and cooking for the soldiers, in which I was assisted by the other females.
These women were oftentimes cooking meals. They were doing the laundry as frequently as laundry actually got done for these Continental Army soldiers. And they were also doing small things like darning socks and mending, which actually was quite important because the supplies to the Continental Army were never as plentiful as they should have been.
A private's wife, nicknamed Molly Pitcher, goes from carrying water for her husband's gun crew to manning his post when he is wounded. And Deborah Sampson, a former indentured servant, takes a more unusual route, enlisting in the 4th Massachusetts as Robert Shurtleff. She serves with distinction, discovered only when she becomes ill with fever at the end of the war.
Before the Revolution, when people talked about being a woman, it was usually a matter of a judge or a minister telling women how they ought to behave, what they ought to do. But almost at the moment of independence, women's voices begin to be heard. "Remember the ladies," says Abigail Adams to her husband, John. "Why should I not have liberty whilst you strive for liberty?" asks Mary Hayburn of New Jersey to her soldier husband, also John. "Women run farms while men are away fighting. Women run businesses while men are away legislating or raising money to support the war effort. Women learn to do all sorts of things that they previously hadn't thought they were capable of doing, and once you learn something like that, you can't unlearn it.
In early summer of 1776, the Continental Congress is ready to proclaim its independence from England. To compose a formal declaration, they choose a gifted writer, Virginian Thomas Jefferson, at 32, the youngest delegate. A shy, even withdrawn young man, he would have preferred to stay on his plantation due to his wife's poor health and his mother's death in the spring. But his talents are needed, and his duty clear. Jefferson intends the document to be an expression of the American mind, but it is far more than that.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to abolish it and institute a new government.
On July 4th, delegates vote to pass the unanimous Declaration of the 13 United States of America. Bonfires are lit in celebration all across Philadelphia. In New York City, a statue of the king is toppled and ultimately melted down, providing some 42,000 bullets for the revolution.
The Declaration both established the principles of revolution and made it possible in the future for other Americans to claim the right to oppose the government if they felt that their own natural rights were being violated.
What you find in the Declaration instead is the beginnings of a new agenda, what I like to call an American agenda, centered around Jefferson's own words, all men are created equal. That raised very big problems for American society because the reality was that people weren't equal at all. Still, it gave people a goal to aim for, and we've been aiming for it ever since.
Independence is one thing, winning the war is another. The next months are desperate ones for the Continental Army. The British force the rebels to retreat at virtually every encounter. Just when things look bleakest, Washington crosses the Delaware on Christmas Day, 1776, launching a surprise attack against Hessian mercenaries occupying Trenton, New Jersey. It's a stunning move that proves the homegrown army and its commander will not accept defeat. As one observer declares, the maneuver revived the depressed spirits of the colonists and produced an immediate and happy effect in recruiting. The British are doing some recruiting of their own. The king offers freedom to all able-bodied slaves who will fight against the colonists. Many slaves seize their chance and join the English. A famous slave owner, George Washington, moves to counter the inflammatory British proposal.
This stimulated George Washington, the commander of the Continental Forces, to change his initial policy, which had been to exclude blacks from the army, and to allow them to enroll, mostly free Negroes. But eventually slaves could also go into the Revolutionary Army. Maybe about 5,000 fought under Washington's army during the Revolution, mostly from the northern colonies and states.
During the war, Vermont becomes the first place in the Western world to abolish slavery. Massachusetts and New Hampshire soon follow. October 1777. At Saratoga, New York, the unexpected happens. A colonial army overpowers 7,000 British troops, cutting them to pieces. 1/4 of the English army in North America is forced to surrender. Suffering in the defeat are Indians, who fight alongside the British to protect their own lands and their freedom. Hearing of the huge American victory, the King of France, Louis XVI, commits his fleet and 6,000 French soldiers, crucial support for the fledgling United States. Despite the success at Saratoga, Washington is still in serious trouble. Losing Philadelphia to the enemy, he withdraws his army to Valley Forge in the heart of winter. Over 2,000 of his 12,000 men will die during the icy season. But their spirit and their willingness to suffer the worst does not waver. Wrote Private Joseph Plum Martin,
"The army was now not only starved but naked, destitute of all other clothing, especially blankets. But we were engaged in the defense of our injured country and were willing, nay, determined to persevere."
From an admiring George Washington,
"To see men without clothes to cover their nakedness, without blankets to lie upon, and submitting without a murmur, is a proof of patience and obedience which, in my opinion, can scarcely be paralleled."
October 19th, 1781, the 7th year of the war. Under siege by the Americans, cut off by the French Navy, his men sick with disease, British General Cornwallis surrenders his army at Yorktown, Virginia, virtually ending the war. The British military band plays "The World Turned Upside Down."
Nobody expected when the war began that it was going to take 7 years. Nobody expected that there would be thousands and thousands of deaths. Colonials, on the point of becoming Americans, thought that their own virtue would quickly defeat the British. Look what happened at Lexington and Concord. Look what happened at Bunker Hill. They found, however, that they were up against professionals who fought long and hard and honorably. In the midst of all the suffering that it took to defeat those professionals, I guess the only answer as to why they did do it is something like this. People sometimes start out on what they think is going to be a short road, and it turns out to be a very long road indeed. And they find within themselves what it takes to walk every step of the way.
It has taken 7 terrible years. Yet even after suffering a long string of military disasters, desertions, and mutinies, Washington and his homegrown army have persevered. Independence is won, American freedom assured. The revolution is not a triumph for everyone. The great losers are the Indians. Most tribes fought on the side of the British. Once the war is over, they have no place to go. And now they have a new nation, the American nation, to contend with.
One way or another, the war and the revolution changed how everybody lived between the Atlantic seaboard and the Mississippi River. For slaves, the revolution and the war were paradoxical. We might say that a window was half opened, and that some people climbed through that towards freedom. Some did it by going to the British, who welcomed the slaves of rebels as weakening the American side. And when it was all over and the British departed, a large number of black people departed with them, heading for Newfoundland, heading for England, heading even for Sierra Leone. Others challenged white America to live up to its own words, and in this sense, the revolution marks the beginnings of slavery's destruction.
In the aftermath of the revolution, white women do not appear to have made radical claims to have equal political rights with men. They did not envision themselves as citizens like their husbands and fathers and brothers, but rather carved out a different role for themselves as the educated mothers and wives of male citizens. And in this way, they saw themselves as having an indirect role to play in politics.
The new United States, with its explosive ideas of liberty and equality, will inspire democratic change around the world.